the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights.
Hey everybody, welcome on this Saturday morning. Unusual for the Iran Book Show. I know for some of you, it's pretty early if you're from on the West Coast, or if you're. But maybe we'll pick up some Europeans that this is a more reasonable time for them for the show. We'll see. What the audience composition is as we go along. So yes, it's 11 a.m. on the East Coast. It's 8 a.m. on the Pacific Coast. But there we've got one European. I see Jimbo is there. We've got your European. Hopefully we have. Button my shirt. Thank you, Valdrin. All right. But here it's 12 p.m. It's 12 p.m. I'm on the same time zone as Al Hadrina, and we've got somebody from India, 9 p.m. So we've got a whole array of people in different time zones. So I know I originally advertised that today's show would be different. It would be on Jordan Peterson and romance and some on the minimum wage. I'm not sure how I combine those. We'll see. But for a couple of reasons, I decided to switch that. That show will be on Monday. So on Monday, I'll be talking about Jordan Peterson's view of romance, and either I'll talk about minimum wage with that show, or maybe I'll just do the whole show on romance. We might as well just do the whole show on romance. And then I'll move the minimum wage discussion to Wednesday. So we'll have a show on Wednesday. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we've got our Q&A show with our supporters and Super Chat. So that's tomorrow, Sunday, at 6 p.m. East Coast time. I am on Puerto Rican time, which is Atlantic time zone, so we do not have daylight saving or whatever. So we are an hour ahead of the East Coast during the 5 months from, I don't know, October through to March. And then when you guys switch time zones in March, we catch up to you, or you catch up to us. So when am I moving? Looking for a new setup. Probably moving, I don't know. So it depends on when, there's a bunch of stuff that has to happen. But my best guess is May, June, just by the time everything, renovations and close the deal. First we have to close the deal, then renovations and stuff, but probably most likely May. All right. So a couple of things about the topic today before we jump into the topic. I think now it's public information that Leonard Peikoff has been diagnosed with COVID and is in hospital. I think I saw that went public on Facebook yesterday. He was diagnosed with COVID 2 weeks ago, so I've been kind of getting daily updates on how he is doing over the last 2 weeks. So it's been a very stressful, very scary, very distressing time. Given he's 87 and he's got certain pre-existing conditions, and it's risky, right? 87, it's very scary. But he is, I think, over the worst part of it. You never know with COVID. COVID is this. It's a weird disease, and the way it manifests and the way it affects people is strange, and it has lasting effect. But so far, so good. I think he's got the best treatment the one can get, and he's got he's got a doctor really who advocates for him and is really helping him get the treatment, the best treatment that he can get. So I think we think he seems to be stable, and I hope he gets to go home soon. But he is in the hospital. So one request that I got from his daughter yesterday if anybody would like to write a note to him, tell him how much you appreciate him, tell him how much you care for him, this is a great opportunity to do so. He, if you send it to me at yuron@yuronbookshow.com, yuron@yuronbookshow.com, I'll forward it to Kira, his daughter, and she'll read them to him when she calls him up. So, she'll read the note to him. He's looking for any kind of messages to do that. So just send them over to me. I got a text yesterday from Kira to ask that people who care about him and have something positive and would like to communicate something to him, you have an opportunity to do that. So just write up an email, send it to me. I'll forward it to Kira, and she'll read them to him. Let's see. Yeah, so that's obviously one reason COVID's on my mind, and has been for the last 2 weeks, but I've avoided talking about it because, originally when he was diagnosed, everybody wanted it to be kept private, so we have kept it private, and I've not discussed it publicly since then. All right. Second reason is I gave a talk yesterday in, where was the talk? The talk was in Utah. I mean, I was here in Puerto Rico, but the audience was in Utah. It was at the university in Utah. All right, the name just BYU, of course, BYU University. It was to the Federalist Society, at BYU, and the Adam Smith Society at BYU. So it was and is the. So it was a talk I gave yesterday, and they had asked me to give a talk about the regulatory state, right? The regulatory state versus the what do you call it? The versus free markets. So I was asked to give a talk on the regulatory state and free markets, and I did, right? And it landed up being a talk that sorry, whoops, what did I do? Sorry, I am doing stuff on the computer, and it's screwing this stuff up, so I apologize. So free markets versus the regulatory state was the topic of the discussion, and it was there was a law professor there to comment on my talk. Hopefully we'll have a chance, we'll get the video of the talk and put it up at some point on the channel. But I thought it was a good talk. And the day I was supposed to give the talk, I was going to give my standard talk about capitalism and free markets. And the day I gave the talk, I had the idea of doing the talk in the context of COVID. Because I think that what happened last year is an amazing illustration. An amazing illustration of what the regulatory state actually does to us. And what are the consequences and what are the costs of the regulatory state? And what the contrast is with the free market. And I thought that, really looking at 2020 and looking at the response to COVID is a laboratory for the effectiveness, or in this case, the ineffectiveness, the disaster, the murderous disaster that is the regulatory state. It's a little petri dish. And I really haven't seen anybody do this, anybody take apart what happened in 2020 in the context of this is what government does. This is what government does to you in a sense as an extreme, but this is what the regulatory state does to you every single day. This is what a regulatory state does to you on a regular basis. This is what the regulatory state, this is the situation the regulatory state creates. Thank you, Jonathan. If you write a little something, I'll send it to Leonard and wish him your best, which I think he'd appreciate. The regulatory state is a killer. The regulatory state kills people, makes people sick. Freedom is the solution to any kind of health problem, any kind of pandemic, any kind of disaster like that. And we saw that last year writ large. And it's shocking to me that almost nobody's talking about that. And it's shocking that the lessons we're going to learn, the lessons the culture seems to want to learn from COVID, that we need more government. The government is the solution. The government can solve our problems. We can expect bigger government, more intervention, more involvement, more engagement, more regulations coming out of COVID than we had before, when the lesson we should be learning is the exact opposite. So I want to take two things. Now, I know I've talked about this many times over the last year, but it's good to have it all together. It's good to talk about it all in a particular context. It's good to bring together all the facts that we've kind of accumulated over the last year and kind of present them all in the same place all at once. So all of this in some form, in some way, at some point, I have talked about and discussed. So we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about testing and vaccines, and in the context of the regulatory state and what the regulatory state is responsible for and not, and how that has impacted the world and how that has impacted us, and how that has impacted the probability that people get COVID, get sick from COVID, die from COVID. Before we do that, I just want to remind people to if you do like the show, like it. Don't forget to press the like button before you leave. It, again, helps the algorithms on YouTube. And, of course, you can use the Super Chat to ask questions of $20 or more. Get priority. It's a way to support the show and, of course, a way to also get your question answered and be engaged on these questions. So please use the Super Chat. You can also use YourOnBookShow.com/support to support the show. All right, let's jump into COVID regulatory state. And let's start with testing. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, okay, so we'll talk about a bunch of different things regarding testing, but let's start with the fact that every epidemiologist will tell you, and the best-in-class standards of epidemiology and of dealing with the pandemic are that one should test often, test frequently, isolate those who are sick, isolate those who are positive, try to trace the people who might have been exposed to the person who's positive, and isolate them, or test them, and then isolate them. This is how you deal with the pandemic. It's 101. It's the basics. And it really is what the CDC had in writing as their plan going into this pandemic. Every single plan dealing with the pandemic starts with test, trace, isolate. Now, to be able to test, trace, isolate, first you need a test. Now, what's interesting is that in middle of January, a Chinese researcher in a Chinese lab actually published the genome of the virus, and he put it up online and made it accessible to other scientists. Now, the Chinese government penalized him for that and kicked him out of the lab for a while. So, but it's due to heroism of some Chinese researchers like that we know, and we got to know as much as we did about the virus as early as we did, with some significant consequences. But the genome of the virus was known in mid-January. Almost immediately, a number of labs around the world started devising tests to deal with the virus. One of the first tests was produced by the World Health Organization. And that is a test that was used in Europe and some other countries. In South Korea, the government invited the regulatory agencies, I guess, responsible for health in South Korea, invited private companies to design and deploy tests. And they gave them the information, and they said, run with it, and design tests. And South Korea had a test, was started to testing very early on, together with Taiwan and some other Asian countries, all based on tests that in South Korea, at least, the case was that were designed by the private sector. In the United States, the CDC rejected the test that was developed by the WHO, even though it was an effective test, and started to design its own test. It set very ambitious standards for its own tests, standards far greater for efficaciousness, for being able to deal with viruses after they mutated, all kinds of standards that were way too high. As a consequence, or one of the consequences was that the test failed early on. It was a disaster. The agents that were being used were polluted, were no good. Then they kept on trying, and basically what happened was testing in the United States got delayed by about 45 days because the CDC refused to let other labs, including university labs, including biotech labs, refused to let all of them develop their own tests, refused to let the private sector develop tests, while it tried to develop its own test and failed. Now, there are a couple of theories on why it tried to do this, and I don't have an answer. I have no idea. One theory would suggest that they were infused with Trumpism and therefore did not want a test from overseas, and they did not want a test from the WHO because of the resentment the resentment of, it has to be American-made, the whole idea of Buy American. That would be one. Other explanations have more to do with the bureaucracy itself and them wanting to create their own test and pride at the CDC and the scientists wanting to make it their own and wanting to make it the best and be the best in the world. And the two might be connected and the two might add to one another. And there might be other explanations that we haven't heard yet, but the fact is that the CDC failed. Massive regulatory failure. And the CDC did not do what you'd expect we would do in America, which is utilize the fact that we have hundreds of labs in this country. We have dozens and dozens of biotech companies in this country. We have dozens and dozens of labs at universities in this country, all that could be working on a test. And instead of incentivizing the private sector, instead of motivating the private sector to design and build the test and allowing them to deploy that test, in which case we could have been testing in early February. And maybe got a handle on this early enough so that we could have contained it and stopped it, or at least flattened the curve dramatically, and never got into the position of granting politicians the power to shut our lives down. It would have had massive consequences to our lives, massive consequences to saving lives, and massive consequences to the economy. And yet, in spite of the fact that we had a Republican president, in spite of the fact that we had a Republican Senate, and Republican appointees in political positions, in positions in the regulatory agencies, the regulators relied on government for the solution, relied on the regulations for the solution, and did not access the private sector, did not access markets for the design, deployment of testing capability. One can only imagine what would have happened if they had done that. Of course, it would have required another step by the regulators, and that is to actually approve the tests and not set standards that are so ludicrous, so crazy, that testing becomes impossible or too expensive or too cumbersome or too bureaucratic to actually do. I saw a tweet today. Let me see if I can get this tweet. Oops, where is it? I put it somewhere. Oh, there it is. I saw a tweet today by somebody whose wife is actually an emergency room physician in New York and who suffered the worst of kind of the spike in COVID cases in March. He wrote that he ordered some at-home COVID tests. But the FDA hurdles are amazing. Despite it being a six-pack of tests, you're required to have a COVID symptom to order. And after testing, you have to chat with a live provider who reads your results, despite the fact that it's not much different from a home pregnancy test that you can do yourself. So even today, a year, just over a year, since the CDC, the FDA, the Health and Human Services Department knew of the existence of this virus, a year since the first tests were developed in other countries, 400,000 deaths attributed to COVID by officials at the CDC. They obviously think it's a serious thing. They still are creating massive amounts of bureaucracy, restraints, constraints on our ability to test. Now imagine you had a test at home that you could deploy with saliva, easily read like a pregnancy test. And it wasn't super sensitive. But imagine it was such that it told you if you were super contagious or contagious at all. Because when your viral load is low, you're not very contagious. When your viral load is high, you are very contagious. So it would tell you if your viral load is high. And then you would stay home if you were positive, and you would go out without worry if you were negative. And you could do this theoretically every day. There are tests out there that cost $1 a day. But the FDA won't approve it. Why? It's not sensitive enough. But we don't need sensitive tests. That's the whole point. We need tests that tell us if we're contagious or not. And here again, the regulatory barriers are killing people. Literally killing people. And nobody seems to care. Nobody's talking about this. Nobody's up in arms about this. I mean, we could have, again, if we had those kind of tests, let's say it would have taken until the summer to get a test like that. But by the summer it was developed out of a company out of Massachusetts. Then we would be able to take control of this test. We would be able to take control of this test as individuals. Somebody writes the tests were 80% accurate. But 80% accurate is great. It means that a significant number of people who would go out into the world not knowing if they were positive, a significant number of them would know, and it wouldn't stop it completely, but it would reduce the load dramatically and save tens of thousands of lives, if not hundreds of thousands. So just the failure on testing is resulting in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people dying. I mean, right now, the tweet was one story I heard, but another story I heard was that you can buy these home tests at CVS, and the test itself costs $15, and you can buy it, and I think it has, again, multiple, you can do multiple tests for $15. But the government doesn't allow the pharmacies to sell these tests. Doesn't allow the pharmacies to sell these tests unless you also buy an app. And if you add the app and the test and everything else that you need, the cost of the test is $50. Now, $50 is a significant amount of money for a lot of people. Now, you've lost the whole benefit of having at-home tests. Somebody says, if you feel sick, yeah, if you feel sick, get a PCR test, which is accurate. At least much, much more accurate than these antigen tests, these fast antigen tests. But you can go and get a PCR test if you feel sick. Now, even those are not 100% accurate, it turns out. Right? And if you test positive, you just stay home until you test negative. Right? So, I'll get to the vaccines, I promise. But just in terms of regulation and testing, the fiasco is of, massive proportions. It's hard to believe that, imagine 4,000 people a day are dying from COVID. And, the government, because of this regulatory fiasco, nobody cares. Now imagine if private enterprise had done something that was causing 4,000 people to die a day. I mean, private enterprise, the market is blamed for any little thing. If just a few people die of something that the private market does, I don't know, a plane accident or oh my God, the investigations, the lessons learned, the market failure. What about this massive, unprecedented government failure? And nobody seems to care. And this goes, of course, to the fact that we live in a culture that trusts government, that believes in government, and what it doesn't believe in, what it doesn't trust, is the private sector at all. And when government screws up, it gets all the slack in the world. Because, you know why? Because the government is ultimately motivated by, motivated by what? By the public good, by the common good, by altruistic motivations. And therefore, if it screws up, then, but it meant well. They meant well. See, but business is motivated by making money. Business is motivated by selfish motivations, by self-interest. And that cannot be tolerated. So even the smallest breach, the smallest problem, becomes massive. Massive. So it turns out that we could have had the right testing. Testing would have made this problem much, much, much smaller. Many, many tens of thousands of people would be alive, and we would be much safer and ready in a much better condition and have much more time for a vaccine to kick in. But here's the thing about the vaccine. The vaccine in and of itself is a massive regulatory failure. People can talk about Operation Warp Speed, but it's basically, at the end of the day, a complete and utter disaster. As I said before on the show, Joe Biden is now saying, "Oh, we're going to do 100 shots in 100 days, 100 million shots in 100 days." Well, but that's the rate we're at today, which is pathetic. We're doing 5.3 doses per 100 people right now. At this pace, we'll maybe vaccinate all of the United States within a year, if things go well. That's pathetic. It's particularly pathetic when you understand when the vaccine was developed and when we could have started. Now imagine a world with no FDA. Oh, with an FDA restricted to prosecuting fraud and nothing else. Well, it turns out that I told you about the genome being published by a Chinese scientist in the middle of January of last year, about a year ago. Well, within a weekend after that publication, Moderna had developed a vaccine. Within a month following that, they had produced a vaccine. Suddenly by late spring and early summer, they had done what are called phase 1 trials on a vaccine and come to the conclusion that it was safe. Now imagine a world with no FDA, or an FDA again focused on just fraud. Imagine such a world. What would happen? Well, as soon as the vaccine was deemed by the company as basically safe, still risky because the numbers were limited, then companies could have gone out to people, to individuals, and said, look, we've got a vaccine. We think it works. The science is solid. We've tested it. It seems safe. Still risks. But if you want to try it out, we're willing to give it to you while we do, whatever tests our, private testing labs would require us to do in order to get full certification by these private labs, the privatized FDA. And you, voluntarily, would go and get vaccinated or not. And if you did, you would feel free, right? You would go out there into the public. You wouldn't have to, and maybe you actually got a thing that you could show businesses saying, I don't need to wear a mask because I've been vaccinated. Or maybe not. But you could go to work, you could fly on airplanes, and you could at least feel safe about yourself. You could interact with older people because you would feel safe about you. And imagine that over the next few months, data came out. And as the data came out about how safe it really is and how efficacious it really is, more and more people would sign up. Now, talk about a study. You would have here, hopefully, millions of people signing up, and the study would be massive. And instead of waiting until November to consider authorizing it, and then wait another 3 weeks to show the world you're really thinking about it, which is what the FDA did, so it only approved it in mid-December, you would have had people starting to take the vaccine in large numbers, starting in maybe May or maybe June, and by the end of December, you would have had a significant portion of the American population vaccinated. You would have known whatever side effects there were and they weren't. And you would know, what the path forward is. And we would be over this very quickly. But no, you cannot as an individual get a vaccine unless the FDA tells you it's okay to get a vaccine. The FDA has no incentive to do that quickly. Their incentive is to show the world that they do a good job, that they are not too risky, that they care about human life. Because when does a person at the FDA lose his job? When somebody dies because of a yes answer that they gave, or somebody gets sick because of a yes answer that they gave. If some drug turns out to not be effective or to have awful side effects, that's when they lose their jobs. They never lose their job when they say no. If they say no to a cancer drug that's going to save hundreds or thousands of people's lives, nobody's going to fire them because nobody will know that those people's lives could have been saved. If they say no to a vaccine, then everybody goes, oh yeah, the FDA is being cautious. It's going to be cautious. 400,000 people have died. even if they don't lose their jobs, they get bad press. None of them want to be, and some of them do lose their jobs. I mean, they don't want to be in a position where they're being blamed for approving a drug that turns out to be bad. So they err on the side of caution. It's built into their incentive structure. Even if they're very, very good people and want to do the best job possible and really care about human life and all of that, their incentive structure, just as an institution, is built to prevent them from doing a good job. Tens of thousands of people have died, but that's the status quo, so nobody cares. But if somebody gets sick because of vaccine, oh my God, people rip their hair out because that's not the status quo. Somebody gets side effects. So it's truly, again, I don't understand a culture that is so concerned about how many people have died. Again, the official numbers of, I think, 400,000, right? And going up all the time. Whether it's overreported or not, I will leave that to a different discussion. But the official numbers, the numbers that should motivate people, should motivate the media, should motivate just people, right? The official number is 400,000. And yet nobody cares about the fact that many of those people could have been vaccinated in the summer and not have died. Nobody questions the regulatory design of our government, and nobody extrapolates, well, if this is going on with COVID, maybe this goes on every day, every year, all the time, with regard to hundreds of other diseases, and maybe many people are dying from cancer and other diseases that don't have to. Now, what are we told? We're told, oh, but we need the FDA. Because if you don't have the FDA, there might be fraud. So there might be bad tests sold. You mean like the one the CDC developed? But yeah, okay. So somebody might just create a box with nothing in it, pretend it's a test. Well, I'm okay with having a government agency whose only job is to catch fraudsters. To catch fraudsters, not to prevent fraudsters, to catch fraudsters. And if they devoted all their energy and all their focus just to catch fraudsters, they would do a pretty good job at it, and I think we could get rid of the fraudsters. But how long would fraudsters really exist in a marketplace with competition? I mean, one of the groups that have a strong incentive to catch the fraudsters are the competitors, are the good guys, the good companies. The pharmacies who are selling the product, they would investigate. I mean, there's so many ways you could catch the fraudsters. Yeah, generally, maybe not a good idea to buy a testing kit online from an unknown vendor who you've never heard of and nobody is willing to back. Right? And the same with drugs. Imagine a world in which you had competition to approve drugs, to recommend to doctors and to hospitals and to pharmacies and to healthcare providers. Yes, this drug we think is really efficacious, really good. And there was competition. There were different agencies and maybe CVS had its own unit because it wouldn't want to sell a drug at CVS that didn't actually work. So they had their own testing labs. And it would have to compete with Walmart, and it would have to compete with who knows who else would have these testing labs. And then you would be able to see who gets it right consistently and who doesn't. And that would give you a competitive advantage. Imagine if that were the case. And the focus was on patients and curing patients and getting drugs in patients and disclosing information. Imagine if you actually got the information sheet that said, this drug actually does help disease X, but just note that it might cause you Y. And here are the probabilities. And we advise you, talk to your doctor about this. You and your doctor make the decision about whether you should take it or not. Imagine that. Well, obviously, if a test was 50% accurate, it would be like flipping a coin. Of course, you wouldn't take a test that was 50% accurate because that just means it's either right or wrong, right? It's meaningless. And of course, it depends. Accurate in what sense? Does it give false positive, false negatives? Are they equally weighted false positives or false negatives? Yes, it's a coin flip, of course. So, it's stunning that the free market solutions to this are so obvious and so easy to imagine but yet nobody does. Nobody wants to. And we live in a culture that wants to rely on anything important on the government when it's exactly the opposite. The things that are most important to us, we should not rely on force. Again, the only thing government is good at, because it's the only thing that is uniquely governmental, the only area where we need a monopoly, is on the use of force. It's on the use of retaliatory force. It's to protect us. But other than that, as we know, markets work. And there's no doubt in my mind that we could have had this vaccine months and months and months ago. There's no reason so many people have died from COVID. No reason why so many people have been sick with it. It's the regulator's fault. It's government's fault. And that's where the blame should be put. It's the CDC, it's the FDA, it's the people who manage the CDC, the FDA, the Trump administration, the Biden administration. It's their fault. They did this to us. This is a government catastrophe on a scale that is rare. And what is truly shocking is that nobody's blaming them for what they've done to us. If ever was a time to rail against the regulatory state and its consequences, now is the time. Now look, for example, okay, so we got the vaccine. Now let's talk about distribution. Government has basically made it illegal for you and me to buy a vaccine. Only the government is allowed to buy the vaccine. Only the government is allowed to distribute the vaccine. Only the government is allowed to determine who gets the vaccine. So we have a bunch of medical ethicists sitting in a room making lists of who to prioritize over whom. By what standard, you might ask? Well, it's kind of obvious. It's not even a utilitarian standard. It's not even some pretense at stopping the virus standard. The standard is unequivocally, undeniably altruism. Need is the standard. Need of individuals, not even taking into account the fact that they're vaccinating all the wrong people. If they want to stop this, if they want to save lives. So yes, I get medical workers. Makes complete sense, and in a free market, who would have the highest incentive to buy large quantities of vaccines and vaccinate their employees? Well, hospitals, because they rely on those employees to keep the hospital functioning, to keep it making money, to keep it treating its customers. And they're the most susceptible because they have to deal with the disease on a day-to-day basis. So the first people that would be vaccinated, because they would bid the price up the highest in a free market, would be health workers, because hospitals would buy it. But then who would come next? Is it true that the most urgent population to get vaccinated are old people? Is it true that old people are the ones who get vaccinated? Probably not. Old people have a way of not getting the virus. Isolation. They can self-isolate. And thus shield themselves, at least to a large extent, from getting the virus. Who do old people usually get it from? Well, from people they interact with, whether it's people at the grocery store, whether it's people who work in their homes, or whether it's people they socialize, usually younger people. I mean, if you just wanted to suppress the virus, the group that should get the vaccine are what we call super spreaders. People who go out at night, people who go to bars, people who interact, people who mingle, people who work in old age, in various homes of older people, people who work in facilities where older people are. Those are the people who should be vaccinated first. And of course, those homes and those facilities, again, have a huge incentive to buy vaccines, primarily to vaccinate their staff. Little kids, there's no, as far as I know, there's no strong evidence that little kids transmit the virus very well. It seems the virus has very low loads in little kids. So it's not little kids. What you want is the people who spread this tend to be younger, they tend to be active. Who else has a strong incentive to buy a vaccine and to pay a lot for the vaccine? Well, people who go to work, companies who need workers to be at work. So, for example, grocery store workers, no matter what age they are, the grocery store chains have a strong incentive to buy the vaccine to vaccinate their workers. Amazon has a strong incentive to buy the vaccine to vaccinate its workers. In other words, the marketplace would actually allocate the vaccine to the people who that it's most important to get it. Those who can keep our economy going, those who keep what the market believes are essential services going, like hospitals and grocery stores, and those who are most likely to spread it because they travel or because they interact. And only then, if their viral load is now lower, if they are less likely to get it, if the super spreaders are not spreading it anymore because they're vaccinated, then you've got a much smaller problem on your hands. You've got a much less of an issue. And then you can start vaccinating other people. But by the time you get there, by the time you get to the elderly, infections are way down and deaths are way down. And also note that what does the price mechanism do? Well, it increases supply. The government basically has a fixed cost at which it buys these. If it wants more, is it going to pay more? Well, that's not how government officials think. Why would we pay more? But a market system that lets price fluctuate would provide strong incentive to suppliers to create more vaccines. Now, it's complicated to make vaccines, I realize that. But imagine how complicated it is today when price is capped by government versus much more profitable. Imagine transportation and storage done by the government today versus FedEx, UPS, Walmart, CVS in a free market. Who do you think will distribute it better? And then, these are some of the things I read yesterday. So, in New York State, the model of bureaucratic inefficiency. In New York State, to give a vaccine requires between 20 to 60 minutes of filling out forms. Every shot in the arm takes an hour. Not because the shot takes an hour, that takes less than 30 seconds. But because the forms take between 20 minutes to 60 minutes to fill out. Why do you need forms? Why can't I buy the vaccine on Amazon Prime and self-inject it? There are these syringes that make it quite easy to self-inject yourself. Why can't I buy it that way? Why can't it be shipped in dry ice to me in my home and for me to inject it? The free market would come up with solutions like that. No, because you have to fill out forms. You have to talk to a nurse. Only authorized personnel can actually give you an injection. They have to be certified. They have to have a license. They have to go through government permissioning. So then what happens? What happens is, even though there's urgency about giving these vaccines, what happens in New York State is that they vaccinate the people on their list, and then they have some vaccines left. And they can't get more people to come in to vaccinate them. So what do, you think, with the vaccines? Because they're only allowed to vaccinate healthcare workers and people over 65, let's say. I'm not sure what the standards are exactly in New York. And they have some vaccines left, so what are they supposed to do with them? Because they've got a form. And by the way, massive fines in New York if you vaccinate somebody not on the list. If you vaccinate somebody out of order. Huge fines. What happens to the vaccine? If there's leftover and they don't have anybody who's over 65 or health worker, they throw it out. They trash it. Now, remember, we're short on vaccines. There's an urgency to get more and more vaccines out there, to get more and more people vaccinated. And the state of New York and many other states are throwing it out because it doesn't meet the standards. They're not on the list. You know what they do in Israel? This is the Israeli method, right? The Israeli method is you go out into the street and you say, hey, we've got some extra vaccines. Anybody want to get vaccinated? Come on, anybody, come on in. That's how Israel is way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of vaccination. I mean, its logistics are better. It's better organized. But in Israel, they don't throw out vaccines. If there's more vaccines at the end of the day, they find people. They call up their relatives. They find people off the street. They bring them in and they get vaccinated. Because in spite of Israel being more socialist than America, they're less rigid and bureaucratic and stupid about these things, because this is just stupid. And if you happen to be 18 years old and you get vaccinated, hey, it's better an 18-year-old get vaccinated than we trash it. But no, in New York State, it's better to trash the vaccine than give it to an 18-year-old, because Como, God, ordered it thus. Now, Israel's not the model for this. I bet you it could be done 1,000 times better than Israel's doing it. But whereas the United States is doing about 5.3 vaccines per 100 people right now, right? Israel has it to 38.83. So Israel is almost 8 times more effective at distributing vaccines than the United States. And part of it is because they're not worrying about the order as much. They're willing to shoot from the hip. They're willing to figure it out as it goes along. They're not going to follow some bureaucratic, ridiculous dictates from above on the order at which, I mean, you should be so pissed off about this. You should be so angry. I mean, again, just the distribution of the vaccines are proof in front of our eyes of the inefficiency, the immorality of government, of regulatory agencies, of central planning, of the whole array of statist policies. I mean, you guys should be furious. Particularly when you've got somebody who you love who has the disease. And they don't have to have it. They don't need to have it at this point. Because by now, it should be over. It would have been over if we'd let the market work. But we're willing to sacrifice, and this is altruism, right? We're willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people so will we not question our altruism. We're willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people not to question the role of government. We're willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people just not to rely on markets, rely on self-interest, and allow our morality to be questioned. So, I mean, thank you, John. It's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling is the term. One last thing about vaccines, and then I'm going to let this go. There are more vaccines out there. In the United States, we're basically doing 2 vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna. But there's a Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and there's an AstraZeneca vaccine. There's a Russian vaccine and a Chinese vaccine. Put aside the Russian and Chinese vaccine. Maybe we don't trust them that much. But Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca. In the UK, which is vaccinating at a faster rate than the United States per capita, still nowhere near as close to Israel, they're using all of these vaccines. Johnson & Johnson only requires 1 shot, not 2, and doesn't require the stuff to be frozen at minus 100 Fahrenheit. Why aren't these vaccines approved? Why aren't these vaccines being distributed? If Biden wants to shake things up, why doesn't he just approve the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson, particularly the Johnson & Johnson, and get it out there? I don't think anybody's using Johnson & Johnson, but why not? Put it under. It's a little riskier. You get it. You get to choose. I'd rather take it now than later. But the AstraZeneca people are using. Why the United States says they'll approve it in April? I mean, it's like, yeah, people are dying. No big deal. We'll just wait. We've got, there's some forms that haven't been filled yet. And we've got some check marks to make in some boxes. And, the British have done it faster. But, I'm not sure if we should trust the British because they're a third world country anyway, right? I mean, a European after all. So we'll just wait until April, until we have filled out all the forms and checked all the boxes and done the work that we need to do, because we only do, we are American, right? And we Americans have to approve vaccines for Americans. I mean, that's what it is. It's the same with the CDC not having approved the test because it was designed outside of the United States. So we're not going to use that test, or for whatever reason, right? I mean, if people are dying, get every vaccine in the world that has shown that it's safe and start getting it into the arms of people and keep track of who's getting what. And we'll learn from that because, hey, we might have to be vaccinated every year or something. But again, no. Nope. All right. As you can see, I am unbelievably angry, frustrated. And yesterday, and you'll see this if we get the video and can release it, the law professor came back and said, well, I'm not an expert on COVID. I mean, he did a good job, and he said he had to oppose me after all. And he said, but we've got all these reasons why we need regulations. And none of the reasons stood up. And certainly none of the reasons stood up in the face of an emergency, in the face of people dying. All right. Just a reminder to like the show before you leave. We should have a lot more likes there than we have right now. If you get value out of the show, then I'd appreciate your support. I really would. The support is very much appreciated. You can do it on the Super Chat, as some people are doing. You can do it on YourOnBookShow.com/support. You can do it on Patreon as a Subscribestar. Value for value, it's a trade. And I appreciate those of you who choose to trade with me. Thank you. So don't forget to like the show before you leave. That's also part of the trade, I think. Okay, let's... I've vented. I got it out of my system. I needed to do that. let me tell you about a few shows that are coming up. Tomorrow we'll have our Q&A show with some of my supporters, $25 and up supporters get a Q&A tomorrow. And it'll be a super chat, and I'll just be answering questions. It's a great time to come on board and just ask questions about anything. So open Q&A tomorrow. Then on Monday, I'll be talking about Jordan Peterson's view of romance, and maybe the objectivist view of romance, and the purpose of the romance, and the value of romance, and romantic love. So we'll talk about romance and I've got a little video of Jordan Peterson talking about romance, and so we'll talk about that. Kind of a positive topic, although Jordan Peterson's view isn't, but our view is positive topic. On Monday, that'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow will be at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Then on Wednesday, we'll talk about minimum wage. Joe Biden wants to raise them to $15 an hour. $15 an hour on a national basis. We'll talk about the damage to the minimum wage. And we'll talk about more than just the impact it has on unemployment, because I think minimum wages are much more interesting than that. There's a lot of damage that they cause beyond just localized unemployment. So we'll do that. Then on Saturday, next Saturday, I'm going to have Amesh Adalja here. And we're going to do something a little different on Saturday. We've got a sponsored show. Matt has sponsored the show, and we're going to go over some scientific papers related to COVID. I think one of them is related to mask wearing. And we're going to ask questions about how do you evaluate scientific papers? How do you get a sense of when a scientific paper is valid or not? What does it look like in terms of validity, scientific validity? Why, for example, did Amesh change his mind about masks? What was the basis for that? So we'll be analyzing that, kind of almost an epistemological show, and that'll be also in the morning. So sorry, guys, but it'll be 11 a.m. next Saturday. We will be doing that. And then in February, I'm going to do a show with, also sponsored by Matt, I'm going to do a show on discrimination law, and we're going to have Steve Simpson join me to talk about discrimination law, the status of it, the ethics of it, what it looks like in the future. So we're mixing it up a little bit. We're going to do a bunch of different shows. Also sponsorship. This one by Troy, who sponsored a lot of shows. We're going to do one show on Atlas Shrugged and one show on the Fountainhead, or maybe we'll mix them both up. I'm not sure exactly. But what would be great is if you guys sent me questions, any kind of questions you have about the Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, just send me an email at yaron@yaronbookshow.com. Any questions you might have about Atlas Shrugged or the Fountainhead, about the characters, about the plot, about what something means, about anything that you find interesting about them. I want to try to build a couple of shows around answering those questions, around the topics that those questions bring about. So, please send those in, yaronbookshow.com. So I'll try in the future to give you heads up like I did today about future shows, at least when I know what they're going to be and the topics, so you can start thinking about them. And of course, you can sponsor a show on any topic you want that I guess I'm okay with for $1,000. So to sponsor a show is $1,000, and I will do a show on the topic that you want. So, and if you're interested in that, again, you can write to me at yaron@yaronbookshow.com. I just want to mention one more thing before we go to the Q&A. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but I know a lot of people here were not at the beginning of the show. It's not public information that Leonard Peikoff is in hospital. He has COVID. He is, I think, past the really critical point, and we think he's going to be okay. At least he's stable and maybe coming out of it. We'll see. Hopefully we'll be going home at some point. But this is scary, very scary to a lot of us. One of the reasons I'm so upset about all this stuff about COVID and the government's response to it is that it's personal. People people you care about, people you love get affected by it. And it's infuriating because it's unnecessary. And he has asked that if you are interested in sending him a note of appreciation, sending him a note of just support, of just something that expresses your feeling towards him, then feel free to do that. The best way to do it is if you send me an email, I'll aggregate them all up and send them to his daughter, who will then read them to him over the phone. Which is the best way to communicate these things to him, because he's not getting email right now. So the best way is to communicate is for somebody to read it over the phone. So you can send me an email with your thoughts. I noticed I got one or two already while we're doing the show. Send me an email with your thoughts, and I'll forward them to his daughter, and she will read your comments to him. So I think it'd be great if we got a lot of them, and make them. Try to make them meaningful more than maybe a sentence. Try to make them meaningful. I think it'll raise his spirits significantly at a difficult time. All right. Let's see. Let's do some of the questions. Okay. The private sector has a mechanism to punish failure in the form of lawsuits. Yes. The government regulator has no reason to be accurate or competent other than their own integrity. Absolutely. And it's very hard to keep your integrity in an environment like that. And even if you want to keep your integrity, what about all the other people you have to cooperate with and work with? It's almost impossible to do. And the private sector has a monetary incentive built in, if you will. Not only lawsuits, bad reputation, and loss of customers, all the costs associated with losing people's trust, with delivering a bad product, with delivering a product that results in bad consequences, all of that, right, is incentive for the private sector to function significantly better than the private sector. Would you debate Twitcher streamer destiny? Also, what do you think of Peter Singer's argument justifying elective abortion after the birth of a child? Yeah, sure, I debate Twitcher streamer destiny. If you can arrange it, I will do it. That would be great because we'll get a very large audience. What do you think of Peter Singer's argument justifying elective abortion after the birth of a child? Well, that's not abortion. That's murder. So there cannot be a moral justification for committing murder. So no, I haven't. I don't know what Peter Singer's argument justifying it, but again, it's not abortion. Abortion is before birth, so that's just murder. And I'll look up Singer's argument. Maybe you can ask it again sometime. But yes, I would debate destiny. All right, we got a $25 question. Do you think Dr. Adalja is hesitant to say things you do because of his employers, etc.? Well, I mean, first I think you should ask him. So anything I say is pure speculation. But look, if he comes out as really radical as I am, then his voice is going to be muted. Right? He won't get a platform. He won't. So, and his job is not to be radical. His job is to give advice vis-a-vis the epidemiology of the situation. It doesn't control it. And he would lose influence. He would lose an audience. He would lose the press. So I understand completely that he has to walk a very fine line of both conveying the best information about what is going on and what should be done without getting to the point where he can't convey that information because nobody will interview him, because the government people at the FDA or CDC won't listen to him, because his employer, will assign him somewhere else. I don't know. I'm speculating on all of that, but that seems likely, very likely to me, and completely rational. His job is not to change the world. His job is much more finite and much more restricted, particularly in emergency. It's not a time to launch a revolution. It's, unless you can win, but it's a time to try to move it in a better direction, even if that means moving it incrementally. Adam, thank you. I really appreciate that. Any thoughts on George Gilder? I like his views and books, Supply Side Economics. I mean, I like George Gilder mostly. We disagree. I know George Gilder. We've interacted. I think his books are always interesting. It's always interesting to hear him speak. But, and this is the big disagreement between us, he believes essentially that capitalism is altruistic, that everything about capitalism is altruistic. It's altruistic to be investing long term. It's altruistic to, in a sense, not to consume today, but to save money. So he believes that. He's completely wrong, and we disagree about it. I think we disagree about certain applications, a certain minor thing, but he's a fascinating guy. He's getting quite old now, or quite elderly, or whatever the nice term of saying it. But yeah, he's got a sharp mind. Ayn Rand actually mentions him when he was much younger, obviously, I think in her last forum talk, and condemns him because of his advocacy for altruism as being the source of morality for capitalism. And that is a big sin, big sin. You can email me at Yaron, Y-A-R-O-N, at Yaron Brook, B-R-O-O-K, show.com. One word, yaronbrookshow.com. Yaron at yaronbrookshow.com. You can email me a message to Leonard. You can email me a sponsorship. You can email me questions. You can email me whatever you want. I mean, I'm not asking for a flood of emails, but if it's, that is the way to get a hold of me and actually get that email directly to me. Right? Do you marry people? Well, I mean, do I perform ceremonies where I marry people? Yes. You said earlier that you would go to Norway on vacation. We have a spot on the fjords in mind. Love your work. Yes. I mean, I've only married people who are close friends. I guess I would marry other people. I want to be paid. So write to me. And and if we can agree on a date and we can agree on a fee, and and the fee will be lower if I'm going to be in Norway anyway. The fee would be higher if I have to fly to Norway especially. But yeah, I do perform ceremonies, marriage ceremonies. You can do that in the United States, in most states, if not all states. And it's legal and binding and all of that. And it's fun. It's fun, and I can advise on wedding vows. I've got some samples from previous weddings and things like that. So yeah, if that's something you really want, then get in touch with me and we can talk about it. Why is the free market movement muted on this point? I don't know. My guess is because of altruism. Because, now people, it's we don't want to question the authorities when human life is at stake or whatever. I think it's altruism. The best guy on this right now, and I've told you this before, is John Cochran. I mean, I've learned so much from John. He's just truly is fabulous on this issue, and on many other issues, but on this issue. I highly recommend you look him up, the Grumpy Economist blog, and he's excellent on all these issues around COVID. He's excellent in blaming the bureaucracy and the regulatory state and offering solutions and offering ideas. And he's not an objectivist, but on economic policy, I know of right now on this issue, nobody better. I mean, think about, and I didn't mention this during the COVID rant, think about the damage that's being done. Don't put aside, but hold in your mind the 400,000 dead. But add to that the millions of people who've lost their jobs, the destructive economic consequences, the fact that it's going to take years and years and years to get out of this economically, the businesses destroyed, the blood, sweat, and tears of entrepreneurs gone down the drain. Think of the consequences to human life of living under this threat and the ugly, awful, horrific response of government, which has basically been to shut our lives down. Think of all that in the context then of all of this was avoidable if we just had a free market in testing and in vaccines. Put aside everything else. I mean, the free market completely, God, we would have been in such better shape. But just in those two. I mean, just the economic damage is unbelievable. And he's very good on that. Think of the trillions and trillions of debt that we've taken on. Stunning. Stunning. Sacrificing the goal and dreams of female student athletes to include transgender is altruistic cruelty being sold as benevolence. Absolutely. I mean, I commented on this months ago about transgenders sports. I mean, you should be able to have the surgery and switch sexes and everything. You should not be allowed to compete in athletics. You just should not. It's just not fair. And I don't even know if they require you to go through all the surgery and the hormones to be considered a female athlete. I haven't read the thing, so maybe you don't even have to do that, which would be even more horrific. So, yeah, I mean, it's truly evil. It's truly evil. So, I would say, you want to become transgender, fine. You want to not be discriminated, fine. But you're not a woman. You're a transgender woman, which is, okay. In every other respect, we'll treat you as a woman, but you can't compete in sports. All right. The new video about Ayn Rand from Biographies mentions William Hickman. When the journals came out, why did Dave Hammond have to mention it? You should ask Dave. I assume because the fear was that if it wasn't mentioned, then they would have been accused of editing her journals and taking stuff out and not showing everything. But I wish it would have never been published. It's only created grief and need for explanations. And I think there are explanations. I think people who read the journals and take her as admiring this guy I think that is that's dishonest. I think nobody should. Nobody interprets her honestly to be taking the position that some of these biographers claim she took. It's just dishonest. It's just. You can read the passage for yourself, but let's not give it more advertising, Frank, that it already has. Right? No reason to promote this. Okay, I think we're done. Unless somebody wants to jump in with a question, and then we'll keep going. But I think we're done. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget before you leave to like the show. And if you've come late, don't forget to go back and listen to from the beginning. A lot of good material today on COVID, all organized together, all by arguments about testing and vaccines all together. You won't find this anywhere else, except maybe with John Cochran, because I take so much of the stuff from him. He's so good about this. Of course, love your support. Thank you for all of you who choose to support the Iran Book Show and make this possible, and make it possible for me to devote so much time to this. I'm doing 4 shows a week, each one of them an hour and a half plus. That means an hour and a half of straight talking, which is more than a 3-hour radio show would involve. So that's a lot. But what makes it possible for me to do that 4 times a week is your support. So thank you for that. And those of you who don't yet support me, it would be great if you did. IranBookShow.com/support, Patreon, Subscribe Star. And of course, you can do it here on Super Chat. You can do it by asking a question, or you can do it like Ryan just did. Thank you, Ryan. Oh, wow, Richard, thank you. Richard just took us to another level. Thank you for that contribution. You can do it without asking a question, but just to show support. But thank you, Richard. That is very, very generous and wonderful. All right, remember, tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, open Q&A, open Super Chat, bring your questions, make a list. That's one. Monday, 7 p.m., we're going to be talking about Jordan Peterson's view of romance based on a short video of his. and an objectivist view of romance. And then I would add to that I do want to do a show on Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. It would help me a lot if you guys sent me questions. And thank you, Ryan. Put that in an email and I'll send it on to Leonard. You can send me questions and that'll help me create that show. The shows on Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Things that you've been wondering about, the novels, again, character, plot, themes, philosophy, anything. You can send that to me, Jaron, at JaronBookShow.com. And plus, any good wishes you want to send to Leonard Peikoff, please send me an email, JaronBookShow.com, Jaron at JaronBookShow.com, and I will forward to Leonard's daughter, and she will read them to him in the next few days. And soon. That would be great. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. Hopefully I'll see you all here tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Bye, everybody.